Good morning. It's Tuesday, the 14th of October, and this is Govindraj Ethiraj broadcasting and streaming weekdays from Mumbai, India's financial capital. Our top headlines and themes for today. Are IPO listings becoming more muted? Silver sees a historic short squeeze in London as gold prices continue to rise worldwide. Inflation down to an 8-year low of 1.54%. Global airlines are seeing an additional $11 billion in costs because of challenges in aerospace supply chains and how that's affecting airlines and thus travel. World Mental Health Day was last week, and why mental health and stress needs to be tackled separately.
This is the Core Report with Govindraj Ethiraj.
Muted listings. The Tata Group, its troubles at the holding company level at Tata Sons notwithstanding, is generally seen as a good bet for investors. But Tata Capital, which received a lukewarm response on the bourses, by the way, does not have the same brand leadership in non-bank finance as other companies like Bajaj Finance. Now, that may not have been the reason for its fairly muted listing, but it's a point to note, particularly for those expecting any and every Tata company listing to set the bourses on fire. Also, there is bumper-to-bumper traffic on the initial public offer or IPO lane right now. On the other hand, the Tata Group actually has a substantial number of companies doing well on the exchanges right now and for some time in businesses ranging from telecom, hospitality, automotive, software, chemicals, retail, and power to steel. Few conglomerates anywhere in the world will have that many publicly listed companies, all with high retail and institutional investor engagement. Now, Tata Capital is India's third largest non-bank lender by revenue and was valued at about 140,000 crore rupees or about $15.7 billion when it listed. The shares traded at about 329 rupees, higher than their offer price of 326 rupees, but only slightly. But its market capitalization is behind Bajaj Finance and Jio Financial, which are valued at about $72 billion and $22 billion each, according to numbers compiled by Reuters. Meanwhile, Citigroup has said initial public offerings in India could raise as much as $20 billion over the next 12 months. IPOs have already raised about $12 billion in India this year, with another $5 billion set to be added this month alone, partly because of Tata Capital, which listed on Monday, and LG Electronics India arm, which is going to list on Tuesday, that's today. Another reason why Tata Capital was seen as a muted listing was because of great investor excitement over LG, whose shares are expected to list at a premium today. On Monday, the Sensex and Nifty closed down, ending a two-day winning streak. Asia was weak on Monday as expected, though US President Donald Trump did soften his tone on hitting China with 100% tariffs from November 1st. At close, the Sensex was down 173 points to 82,327, and the NSE Nifty 50 was down 58 points to 25,227. In the broader markets, the Nifty Mid-Cap 100 was up 0.11% and the Nifty Small-Cap 0.17%. The rupee came close to its all-time low on Monday but pulled through, mostly because of intervention by the Reserve Bank of India. Reuters said news of an Indian trade delegation's visit to the United States also provided some relief. The rupee closed at 88 rupees 67 paise against the dollar, nearly unchanged from its previous close of 88 rupees 68 paise. Gold and silver. Gold prices hit a fresh record high on Monday after US President Donald Trump renewed tariff threats against China, which of course he moderated somewhat a little later. Ongoing strong investment and central bank demand should offer further support for gold. We target a move to $4,200 per ounce, according to UBS analysts who spoke to Reuters. Spot silver was up 1.5% to $51 per ounce after hitting a record of $51.70, driven once again by similar factors as gold. Goldman Sachs said on Sunday that silver prices were expected to rise in the medium term thanks to private investment flows, but warned of heightened near-term volatility and downside risks compared to gold. Bank of America on Monday raised its forecast, lifting its 2026 outlook for gold to $5,000 per ounce and for silver to $65 per ounce. Bank of America was the first major bank to raise its gold price forecast to $5,000 per ounce for 2026, according to that Reuters report, which is, of course, as clear a direction as you can get as to where gold prices could go if indeed you believe in the gold story. Bloomberg, meanwhile, reported that silver hit the highest in decades as a historic short squeeze in London intensified. Spot silver climbed about 3% to about $52 per ounce. Gold crossed $4,070 an ounce, and platinum and palladium prices were also up. As a background, according to Bloomberg, the silver market is less liquid, roughly 9 times smaller than gold, amplifying price moves. And without a central bank bid to anchor silver prices, even a temporary pullback in investment flows can trigger disproportionate corrections. Retail inflation is down. Retail inflation measured by the Consumer Price Index or CPI was down to 1.54% in September from 2.07% in August, according to data released by the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation on Monday. This is the lowest in 8 years after June 2017, that is. The increase in August, by the way, was the first monthly rise in inflation in 10 months. And of course, this is close to the Reserve Bank's lower tolerance threshold of 2% under its inflation targeting framework. More manufacturing in electronics. The world's largest electronics contract manufacturing firm, Foxconn, could invest about 15,000 crore rupees or close to $2 billion in Tamil Nadu and create about 14,000 high-value engineering jobs as part of its next phase of expansion in the state, according to State Industries Minister TRB Raja. In a report in Business Standard, the new investments will focus on artificial intelligence-led advanced tech operations, value-added manufacturing, and research and development integration. And the investment could spread across multiple locations across Tamil Nadu. A delegation of top Foxconn officials met Chief Minister M.K. Stalin in Chennai earlier. The importance of change. Joël Moquer, Philippe Aghion, and Peter Howitt have been awarded the Nobel Prize for Economic Sciences for their work explaining how innovation and creative destruction drive economic growth. In awarding that prize, the Nobel organization said the three economists had helped deepen the understanding of the drivers of the pickup in economic growth to levels that are high and relatively stable by historic standards. Their work has stressed the importance of science-based innovation and a willingness to accept change even when it has some negative consequences for particular businesses, for groups of workers, according to the Nobel organization. Why airlines are facing extra costs. Global airlines faced more than $11 billion in extra costs from supply chain disruption this year, according to the International Air Transport Association, in a report that's produced with consultants Oliver Wyman. And this is also the first attempt of sorts to quantify the impact of a 5-year supply chain crisis that has driven up fares and led to flight cancellations of the kind we're also seeing in India, though perhaps a little less than previous years. The report says challenges within the aerospace industry's supply chain are delaying production of new aircraft and parts, resulting in airlines reevaluating their fleet plans and in many cases keeping older aircraft flying for extended amounts of time. The worldwide commercial backlog reached a historic high of more than 17,000 aircraft in 2024, significantly higher than the 2010 to 2019 backlog of around 13,000 aircraft per year, according to the IATA report. This slow pace of production is estimated to cost the airline industry more than $11 billion in 2025. This in turn is driven by 4 factors. The first, excess fuel costs, about $4.2 billion because airlines are operating older, less fuel-efficient aircraft. Additional maintenance costs, another $3 billion because the global fleet is aging and older aircraft require more frequent and expensive maintenance. Increased engine leasing costs, about $2.5 billion. Airlines have to lease more engines because engines spend longer on the ground during maintenance. Lease rates have also gone up by about 20 to 30% since 2019. And surplus inventory holding costs about $1.4 billion because airlines are stocking more spare parts to mitigate unpredictable supply chain disruptions, increasing inventory costs. And a lot of this could apply to many industries, but the airlines, I guess, gives you a stark insight on what is happening, the outcome of which you tend to face when you book your next flight. In 2024, IATA says passenger demand rose more than 10%, exceeding the capacity expansion of about 8.7% and pushing load factors to a record 83.5%. And this trend in rising passenger demand has continued into 2025. The World Mental Health Day. Friday, October 10th last week was World Mental Health Day. The World Health Organization says the overall objective of the World Mental Health Day is to raise awareness of mental health issues around the world and to mobilize efforts in support of mental health. The day is also an opportunity for stakeholders working on mental health issues to talk about their work and what more needs to be done to make mental health care a reality for people worldwide. Mental health is an issue many workplaces are also grappling with, including in India. However, there is a tendency to confuse or use mental health and workplace stress issues interchangeably. A new report by Nachiket Mor and Iti Bhargava of the Banyan Academy of Leadership in Mental Health based in Chennai, titled The Workplace Mental Health Model Building Healthy and High Performing Workplaces in Stressful Job Environments, argues that demanding jobs and high stress environments do not directly impact an individual's mental health, but trigger a sense of self moderator, which is SSM, which then leads to mental health outcomes. The moderator is modified by the workplace's organizational design and individual traits, and we'll come to that in a moment. The report and paper proposes a workplace mental health model, or WMH, which suggests that by addressing these SSM modifiers through evidence-based interventions at organizational and individual levels, even in high-stress environments, organizations can have mentally healthy workforces and build high-performance workplaces. I reached out to Nachiket Mor, a banker in a past life, and I began by asking him to walk us through the key takeaways from the report, including the separation of mental health and stress issues.
One of the popular ideas is that stress leads to poor mental health in young people, in older people. And indeed, I'm not going to say that there's no basis to that. There is certainly some trigger. But if stress was the causal element, then everybody who's stressed should be experiencing poor mental health. We don't actually observe that. What we observe is that some people indeed react very poorly and some don't. Olympic athletes, for example, under high stress environments perform really well. I've had experiences of traders that really buzz under the environment of stress. The research that we saw and we ourselves are doing, it isn't so much stress that is the principal factor. It is an important external driver, but there is something about what is happening in your mind, either because of the environment in which you are placed or what's going inside you that is unlinked to stress. That actually, what we would call, moderates the impact of stress. And either you can get actually very good performance and very good mental health, or very poor mental health, even with moderate stress, because something about you is not quite functioning as it should. And it's not just internal to you, maybe something in which you're placed.
Right. So there are two pathways that you've talked about, and the model that you've created and, in a way, presented graphically. And there's this motivational, and mental health outcomes. How do these two pathways work, the institutional and the individual, particularly when it comes to response to having recognized this problem?
We hypothesize the existence of a workplace context or something that we call a sense of self-moderator. As the name suggests, it is an indicator of how strong is your internal antenna or your internal sense of self-worth or your sense of confidence about who you are. Naturally, as you can tell, this is impacted by two things. One is internal to you, what kind of a person you are, what kind of environment you've grown up in, what we call diatheses. Are there issues in your life when you began, before you came into the job, that has had an impact on this? Are there factors outside your control that are organization driven, that are driving? You may start out with a good sense of self, but maybe there's something going on in the organization that is kind of beating it down and that it's not allowing you to function at the highest possible level. These are the two broad sources of what we call modifiers or the moderator that we are interested in. So what we want are situations in which the modifiers are working to build up your sense of self rather than bring it down.
How would that work potentially in an organization? I mean, including from your own experience where you worked with maybe Forex traders who fit exactly that definition that you spoke of versus maybe others who may have been suffering.
My own experience, before I had started to formally study this, as I was mentioning to you earlier, I would hire a lot of people in treasury of the institution in which I was working in. We were a large treasury. Every trader carried large positions. Markets move all the time. And what I found very quickly, we spent a lot of time hiring these people from the best institutions, lots of time spending interviewing people, etc. But what you found is the minute you got these people into the job and gave people a position, some people just buzzed. Even if the day didn't go so well, they would be sad, but there wasn't a sense of brokenness. Whereas there were others that just shriveled up. And we define that as a modifier called goodness of fit, which we think is an important modifier. that has an impact on the sense of self. If you're not fit well into the job, what we would do instinctively is to take some of these people that were really smart and bright. We had spent a lot of time working with them. Maybe they were much better as analysts. They could not hold a position, but they could guide through their models, through their thinking, through their analytics, people who actually had that state of mind. Our advice to organizations based on this insight and that particular goodness of fit modifier is that recruitment should not stop at the point of giving the employment letter. It must continue for some more time, and you must really spend time figuring out what the goodness of it. I'm starting to see similar instances in hospital settings where, for example, I was told that because of need and other pressures, for example, they take up a job because oncology is the hot thing. They take up a job in leukemia. Now, not everybody can deal with a child dying. And unfortunately, you've now gotten into it. And what you find is that some people really get into it and really have the sense of empathy with the child and can progress well and can work well, even though sometimes things don't go well. But others go into a deeper set of issues. They then need to deal with separately. So there are many instances in this particular, modifier called goodness of fit has an impact on the sense of self.
Right. Let's say chart out a path. I mean, even let's say to do early diagnosis in organizations and for individuals as well. Are there red flags? Are there some things that organizations can do so as to distinguish between the kinds of challenges people are facing? And of course, if I'm an individual, can I self-assess in some way?
There are many things that are going on, right? Because as you might have seen from the chart, goodness of fit is only one of them. There is a deeper problem that you see both in college settings, you see it in workplace settings, what we call socially constructed perfectionism. This idea that there is one job, I must become MD, this is one path, and that is success. And you see films made about if you don't become an IS officer, you'll become somebody that serves tea in a tea shop. This idea that there is one perfect goal and there's only one perfect path. We are working in college settings where we are talking to faculty about what is your strategy, for example, to motivate a student. Some argue that doing public display or GPAs, making sure that you know who the top ranker is, who's not the top ranker, is the way forward. Our understanding is this actually does not lead to a strong sense of self. And you start to hurt people by driving these kind of sense of perfections. Clearly, as organizations, there are two levels of diagnosis one would do. One is to try and understand, and it's not hard. It's not as if people are not signaling to you that they're not fit well, that they are not working well in a particular job. I would say our own experience and the research we are doing suggests asking people is often a good place to start in terms of what kind of goodness of fit do they have. There are, of course, other issues that are internal to them, like financial stress, other situations that they're experiencing. And this people may or may not be willing to share with the company. This is something that is private to them and is something that they are struggling with. But what prevents an organization from saying, we will offer, this particularly may be important in blue collar workers, good financial advisory services, not just literacy, but actually work with you to help you think about some of the issues that might be challenging, particularly given lower incomes or moderate incomes that you might have. So at both levels, I don't think diagnosis is such a problem. But of course, what we are doing in our research is we are talking to a wide variety of people, both white collar and blue collar, in organizations, and some of them have asked us to work with them to understand whether in this organization the sense of self as a moderator is strong and is it not doing as well. And there are fortunately standardized tests and questions one can ask people that can help us assess this and then build out a set of interventions.
Right. In the passage of time, you talked about hiring Forex traders and working with them. I'm guessing between that time and today, much has changed. I mean, we've obviously live in a far more social media intense environment, exposure to content, images, text, and algorithmically induced, controlled, and so on. All of that affects mental health one way or the other. How are you seeing this phenomenon from your vantage point? As in, how have things changed and to what extent are more people perhaps suffering? And therefore, what should be or can be, say, a more structured response, particularly in organizations?
Clearly, more challenges are coming up. You expected to join an organization and retire with that organization. And you had the confidence that one way or the other, there was an implicit contract for life. It is very clear now that no organization, perhaps some government organization, but certainly nobody outside it, is willing to give you any such assurance. Similarly, the organization has no such assurance. There is a long-term relationship that one would have. One is constantly, aspiring to move up the ladder, jumping ship, doing this, that, and the other. And that certainly introduces a level of uncertainty and a level of insecurity and a level of risk that can be quite challenging to negotiate. And the point you made about social media, it doesn't help that sometimes there are images being broadcast about what the perfect life is, what this founder did, and what this IPO resulted in so many millionaires and billionaires. And you look at your bank balance and you're counting pennies. So, clearly there is that kind of stress. I must say it's not all bad. We have this general view that social media is an unmitigated disaster and that the only thing that's coming out of it is mess. Actually, that's not entirely true. The evidence suggests that people are forming communities, people are forming groups that actually are good substitutes, even if not perfect ones, for communities they might have formed around them. If you go to cancer hospitals, gaming is encouraged as a way to deal with stress. World of Warcraft has whole environments in which you can start to feel much more engaged in a community that is salutary, that is salutogenic. The question, of course, is how do you make sure that you get the good and don't necessarily get caught up in the bad? And again, that comes back to the whole sense of selfishness. Because anything done to excess, whether it's exercise or gaming, can become addictive, can become damaging. Of course, separate work one needs to do to think about how does one address this concern. But I would say the environment is offering both an opportunity and a challenge.
Right. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
That was the Core Report with me, Govindraj Ethiraj. Do stay connected with more of our coverage at the Core. You can check out our website or sign up to our newsletter for our exclusive stories, one in-depth feature a day on www.thecore.in. Do also track us on LinkedIn, where we usually post synopses or extracts of our top stories and interviews. We would love your feedback on how we can make business more interesting and relevant, including, of course, India's vibrant manufacturing sector. So write to us at feedback@thecore.in. And thank you once again for listening.